we disagree. Like,
Okay, so this is less of a prediction, more of a theory, I suppose. Do you think Code will come back in this arc? Whether it's
as
at
of
the
right
yeah, go
now,
ahead.
I'm thinking no for a couple of reasons. One, we just have so many moving parts. And if Code is going to come back, I think that would have to just be like the plot point 18 surprising revelation type of thing, the big twist. Code's return while he enacts his new plan kind of thing. But Code has not been the antagonist of this arc at all. So him being like majorly in the final battle feels very meh. The final battle should probably be involving the moving pieces we've established thus far. So if Ko is going to get involved, I think it'd be pretty small. More, if anything, maybe just like seeing him to build towards what's going to come in the next arc. Like, let's just say
Yeah.
hypothetically, we see Code in his new hideout and he's laughing to himself, like, this is my next plan. Something like that, I guess is fine. But him like being in the Leaf Village, I'm pretty skeptical about that.
No, I
Especially,
agree.
I mean, he can work with the identity theme, but again, it just hasn't been built up in this arc at all. So to randomly shove it at the end, it's like, why? I don't know. I don't know.
I think he could even play a role similar to Konkoro from the first arc of Shippuden. I mean, first arc of Two Blue Vortex is a sequel, first arc of Shippuden is a sequel. I think those two are fair to compare. So, Konkoro fought Sasori. At this point, this was Act 1 rather than the prologue because it's a Kazekage rescue arc and he's going to go rescue the Kazekage. The
Yeah, it
arc's
was very
officially
much
started.
in the
Yeah,
Kazekage rescue arc.
exactly.
The Kazekage was already stolen to be rescued. He was trying to rescue.
Yeah. So, as opposed to Code, who is in the prologue before Act 1 begins, and he doesn't have any relevance for this arc, he's not trying to find his identity, in my opinion. I mean, he arguably is in some ways, but like, not at least in a relevant way in this arc. He hasn't been, I don't think. Um, and he just obviously hasn't been important for the plot in any kind of way. And he's just like, if he was going to be in the story, he should be in Act 1, not the prologue. Like, so I feel like not
I feel like the
that.
time, if you were, I mean, I don't want to
Or
interrupt
that
you
they
too soon, but if you were
catalyst.
going to do it, I would have introduced him probably like at the midpoint or something. Like
Sure.
Kimimaro. He gets shown up right at the midpoint of the Sasuke retrieval arc. Haku shows up at the midpoint of the Land of Waves. That's probably the time I would introduce him if you're gonna add Code in as like a setback for our characters. But even then, is he even gonna be a setback? I don't. What would his role be?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the problem. Because again, they haven't set up a role for him because that's the problem. They didn't set anything up with this identity nonsense, like or omnipotence or anything in that regard. The only thing they set up, they already paid off before Act 1 began with the Shinju. And was that even a Code setup, or was that just tying him into it for the sake of tying things into each other?
It's just like kind of similar to Kabuto reviving Madara. Like, yeah, Kabuto did that. Is that going to be any of Kabuto's story role? No.
No.
It's just something he did moving, and that's gonna be a problem moving forward. So Code awakened the Shinju, but that shouldn't be like Code's big story role later on, you
And
know?
likewise, Kabuto didn't show up to do anything against Madara. To be fair, he showed up in a coincidental separate side point that isn't relevated to a story or Madara's story to revive Sasuke, but that's beside the point. That ties again back into Sasuke's story, who tied himself into Kabuto's story.
But that was like a payoff
Exactly,
for
exactly. That had nothing to do
what
with
happened in
this
his
thing
story.
with Madara at all. So, no,
Exactly. I
Code,
mean, it indirectly was because Madara is the one who killed him. So I guess in this
that's
case, maybe
irony,
Code will
maybe.
heal Boruto after Boruto gets killed by the
Nah, it's
Shinju,
too
but
far of a
that's kind of like
comparison.
coincidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, no, it's like Code just a catalyst to the story beginning, but he's not the story, and so he shouldn't serve a role in the story. But I agree. Going into the next arc, I would like to see Code again in the very next arc, and so the best way to do that is setting that up at the very epilogue tail end of this arc.
Exactly.
So yeah, have him
It
in
would
his
be
hideout
kind
laughing
of like
away.
the Akatsuki meeting at the end of part one, that sort of idea.
But I do
Or
want a
Itachi
change.
Kisame when they're standing like outside the Leaf
Yeah.
Village. Like they're just like up high. It's the very end of it's before Search for Tsunade, very end of Konoha Crush, like right after the funeral. You just see Itachi Kisame. Again, this is the most minute setup ever, but it's Itachi Kisame being like, ah, the village has been destroyed, or whatever they say.
Yeah.
Something like that, where you just see Code. Code can say whatever. You just see him at the end of the arc.
So I don't need I don't need Code to have a new goal going forward, but I would like him to have a new character arc from this
Oh,
moment
yeah.
forward because things have changed. The Shinju are here, and it feels like in this prologue that he was not having a redemption arc, but just like in the Code arc, he was sadistic, but he has a reason to be doing what he's doing. He's doing it out of love. Like Code's never really been a villain. He just doesn't care about the or he's selfish. He cares about the things that he cares about.
Yeah.
And so sure, he can still win a Chakra Fruit to see if he still loves Zeta. That can be like a long-term thing, but maybe he will team up with Boruto. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to have a redemption arc, but especially his role in this prologue and how he was acting towards the end. Sure, he was doing his old snake-like code things when he left Boruto to fight the Shinju alone after having Uzuhika rescinded, but it still felt like in those moments they were trying to do something with Code that they've been trying to do with Code for a long time, or at least trying to keep his character consistent in this regard. And I want to see them play off that, expand off that in the next arc. He can still be the antagonist to our characters. In fact, he can still do villainous things, but I don't want to see necessarily Code as a villain.
Well, to be honest, I think, especially in light of setting up Code in the epilogue of this arc, I think Code probably should be our antagonist of the next arc,
Yeah.
unless they introduce something completely brand new that we don't know about yet. Because the Shinju are the antagonists of this arc. I don't think we need to have them be the antagonist of the next arc. Just make the arc longer at that point. And then Momoshiki, unless Momoshiki manifests and doesn't get put to rest, and Momoshiki just is the antagonist of the next arc, I'll admit that is a possibility, not one I'm necessarily expecting, but I can see the possibility. Apart from that, though, I mean, you've got Kawaki and Code. Like, we only have a couple of people to work with. It shouldn't be the Shinju, though. So I guess you have Momoshiki, Kawaki, or Code as your potential antagonist of the second arc. Code would work. You just set up what he's going to do, and you could do anything with Code.
Yeah.
With Kawaki, I mean, the only thing you can really do is kind of what we've already been doing. He's just going to try to kill Boruto. Omnipotent shenanigans. If Momoshiki manifests, everyone hates Boruto. He just gangs everyone up. But that feels more like a long-term building plot point, I feel like. So I don't really like the idea of Kawaki being the focus antagonist of the second arc. So I think I like Code as their second arc antagonist. Do you have any contentions?
No, I agree. In fact, that's kind of where I was leaning as well. I definitely do want Code to be the antagonist of the next arc, specifically Code. I will say, I think that the author should just ignore the Western audience just not liking Code and continuing to do what they've been doing with Code, cooking them in the same way. And in the end,
Yeah.
I think they're going to have a quality product. If they start listening to the criticism and start like taking a step back or changing things or meddling with what they already have been doing, it's not going to turn out right. Like they've already started the baking process. You got to cook it through all the way. And what it is, people don't even realize it themselves. They're gonna like Code in the end if they keep going this direction. So they're gonna do that.
It's true though, because if this Code just does a 180 and he's just all of a sudden beating everyone, it's just gonna make you look at like the rest to be like, huh? What happened? Like, it would just be this weird character shift that doesn't make any sense. So you have to be gradual. They've already started what they've started. You have to continue on that path. If you don't, it's going to be bad. And it's not bad right now. So when I say people aren't scared of Code, that's not to say he's bad. It's just to say he's not really the villain. He was just the antagonist of the Code arc, and that's what people fail to understand: antagonist versus villain. That's why I say like Code was a perfectly good antagonist in that arc, and it just you just come to realize he's not the villain after that, and that's fine. And if that's the case, Code's probably not the villain still, at least not currently. You know, the Shinju are clearly more of the villain than he is, but that doesn't mean he can't play a good role as antagonist. It doesn't even mean that he can't just become the villain later on too. There's nothing wrong with any of that.
Exactly.